All right, guys, thanks for coming. I hope some of you hung around after Sky's talk, because I'm talking about the same system, and knowing that he was going before me, I'm going to kind of brief over a lot of the background of the system. So we're back in the San Juan, but I'm going to be talking about the other part of the diet. So not the fish, but I'm going to be focusing on particularly a fruit from a non-native plant. So I'm going to be talking about this interaction between a riparian non-native in Russian olive and channel catfish, and particularly trying to see if this interaction actually supports these channel catfish in the system. So this San Juan's tributary to the upper Colorado. The whole upper Colorado has really been affected by human activities. Dams, the water in the west is obviously very valuable for things like agriculture and municipal use. And with that has come an altered flow regime, resulting in changes in habitat complexity. So if you look at these pictures from 1930 and 2010, you can really see the braided channel that we historically had, and then after the construction of dams, we have a much more changed channelized system now. And along with those physical changes, we also had the invasion of all these non-native species. And currently, we actually have more non-native species in the system than we have native species. Obviously, which Sky talked about, that's causing a lot of problems with the native species. Those physical and biotic changes have led to those native species going into declines, and pike minnow and razorback suckers being federally endangered. Again, today I'm going to be talking specifically about channel catfish, and they're heavily managed in the system. There's a large removal program. So if you didn't see Sky's talk, his stuff was all about that. So again, along with those changes in the aquatic species that are in the system, we've also had big changes in the riparian zone. Originally, the invasion started with salt cedar. It's now transitioned to more dominated by Russian olive. But if you look at bank vegetation coverage over time, that's this figure down here. The orange dots are from the 1930s, the green from the 1970s, and then the purple dots are from 2010. So you can see in that 80-year time period, we had about a 10-fold increase in bank vegetation coverage, which is now dominated by Russian olive. And what's important about this, and to know about the species in the context of this study, is that they produce a large amount of these carbohydrate-rich fruits. And every year in the fall, through the summer, late summer to fall, they ripen, fall from the trees, and a lot of them end up in the river. That's this picture right here is the fruits. And so I'm going to be talking about the interaction between channel catfish and these. But in addition to just that direct interaction between these two species, we do know a little bit about what Russian olive has done in some other systems where it's invaded, and it's altered the input of litter, and so greatly increased it, yet that litter doesn't break down very quickly. So in systems, this has mostly been studied in like spring systems in central Idaho. And so what they found was with that decrease in the ability of those leaves to break down, it's decreased ecosystem efficiency. But in addition, in those same study systems, they found that common carp, so another non-native species, were able to utilize these fruits as a food source. And I actually worked on a project when I was an undergraduate, way back in like 2008. Actually met Daryl doing that project. And I looked at channel catfish diets in the San Juan, and one of the major takeaways from that study was that catfish were consuming a large amount of these fruits every year. We only sampled in the fall. It was a very limited study, so there wasn't much we could take out of that. But I thought about it for about 10 more years, decided to go get my PhD, and this ended up being what I settled on as a research project. So my dissertation was all focused on this interaction and the question, do these fruits, so this high proportion that makes up a high proportion of channel catfish diet, does that actually support channel catfish populations? Now, to get at this question, I kind of had to break it down into these small little pieces. And so I'm going to kind of take you through, first I'm going to be talking about seasonal diet composition, and then I'll go over some experiments that we did to see, okay, now that we know they eat the fruits, are they actually able to utilize it, or can they benefit from consuming these fruits? And then once we knew that, we were able to do some modeling to see, okay, what is this contributing to the overall population of channel catfish? So to get at diet composition, selected 4 sites across the longitudinal gradient, with the first one in New Mexico around Shiprock, That's right through the Four Corners region, so New Mexico, Utah, with the last one being down at Mexican Hat. It's about a 150-mile stretch of river. Each one of those was 8 kilometers in length, and I had 3 reaches within those sites that were nested within it. I sampled every other month from September 2016 to September 2017, and we used single-pass raft-based electrofishing to collect those stomachs. The stomachs were placed on ice in the field and frozen within 24 hours. We also, in addition to collecting the stomachs in the field, we collected availability data. So one of the ideas that we had was, are they feeding on this fruit during periods when other prey was not highly available? We kind of hypothesized that this high carbohydrate, low protein diet item is probably not an ideal diet item, so are they utilizing it during those periods whenever other things are not available? So we did benthic insect sampling with kick nets at every sampling period, and then we also sampled Russian olive using seed traps. So every time we went out, we would measure how much Russian olive is being input into the system and how much alternative prey was available. Once we got back to the lab, we separated that stuff into different categories, took dry weights, same thing for the availability data. Dry weights on the seeds, dry weights on the benthic insects. Then we used some generalized linear mix modeling. I'm not really going to talk much about that today just because I don't have time to get through it all. Okay, so once we did the seasonal diet, again, every other month for a year, obviously, I'm sure all of you know at this catfish meeting that channel catfish are omnivores. And so really all I want you to look at here is those red bars. So those are the proportion of Russian olive in their diet. So basically what we found was they were consuming it almost year-round, and we really expected to see these big pulses in the fall when the fruits were ripe. But we were surprised to see that even in the spring months, we were getting over 50% of the diet. And out of those 7 months we sampled, 4 of the 7 months was greater than 50% of their diet consuming these Russian olive fruits. Then when we looked at the availability, we found that, surprisingly, again, I thought that the late summer, fall was going to be this big pulse and then we wouldn't see much after that. But we actually saw kind of throughout the year, Russian olives were available to them, but they were only seasonally important. So really in the fall and the spring time periods, and these were kind of late summer, early fall samples where you see that. So even though highly available in the winter, not much consumption in the winter, probably temperature dependent. Then we also didn't see much relationship, that inverse relationship between benthic availability or alternative prey availability and consumption of Russian olive. So we really don't think it was a trade-off where they're feeding on those when other prey was not available. And so the takeaway from this first part is that, again, it's an important diet item, it's very prevalent, but only seasonally important. So now, what does that mean? We know that they're consuming it, but are they actually able to get anything out of it? Is it an ecological trap where they're consuming it, but it's really not worth anything? So what we did is we went out and collected a couple 100 pounds of these Russian olive fruits. Originally we wanted to just feed them to fish in the lab, kind of had some problems with that, but we also knew from our diet studies that they weren't exclusively eating this. We weren't seeing where they were eating 100% Russian olives, right? So we mixed different diets and we used an alternative or substitute for like an aquatic insect, which was soldier fly larvae, which is a commercially available meal that people use to make fish food out of. And so we mixed those in 5 different ratios from 100% Russian olive to 100% fly meal. We also used the positive control, so just the commercial catfish food, show that we had good conditions for growth in our study. So again, we made it into pelletized fish food once we mixed those treatment diets. We set this up in aquariums. We had 6 treatments and 5 replicates of each treatment. Fed them to satiation for 45 days. And ideally, we would have kind of had a negative control where we starved fish, but ethically didn't think that was really appropriate, so we used bioenergetic models to estimate what weight loss would be given 0 consumption during our experiment. So as we kind of expected, that high protein, high fat diet of the fly meal performed better than the Russian olives. So kind of as you increase the amount of fly meal here, you're getting an increase in growth. And then the commercial one obviously did the best. But what I want you to notice here is that 100% Russian olive did not lose weight. So those error bars overlap 0. And so what we can say here is that if you compare it to that estimated 0 consumption, we're basically showing that they're able to maintain weight on this diet. So there is some advantage. They're getting something out of it, and they're able to utilize it at least for metabolic energy. They're not, obviously, we're not getting good growth out of those 100% Russian olive, so we think they're able to get energy. Makes sense. It's a high carbohydrate diet. So lastly, to kind of put this in the context of what does this mean for the system, kind of wanted to see, okay, well, what does this mean for the catfish population as a whole? And so we used the bioenergetic approach, which is essentially just a mass balance equation. If you're not familiar with it, we're estimating consumption here in energy, so joules, and that consumption value is equal to the energy that they allocate to growth that's lost in metabolism or that's lost in excretion or feces, right? So if we have these three things, we can estimate consumption. So using Fish Bioenergetics 4, we put together a model. Some of this was from, we used our diet data from that first stuff I talked to you about. We got temperature data from USGS. Several of these came from other papers, such as all our physiological parameters for the bioenergetic model. And then we had population estimates from that were provided to us by Fish and Wildlife Service, which was part of their intensive catfish management program. So we used that to during our sampling period from 2016 to 2017 to estimate what the total consumption of all catfish that were greater, age 3 or greater. So we don't have good estimates of population, basically less than fish that are less than 300 millimeters in the system, and so we only estimated this for fish that were age 3 up. And we used our population estimates with our consumption estimates to get the whole population estimate. And then we basically just saw, okay, for the total consumption of the entire population, how much is Russian olive contributing to that total consumptive demand? And for that year that we sampled, we came out with that Russian olive was supporting about a quarter of the entire consumptive demand of channel catfish in the San Juan. And so just to kind of go back through all that stuff, we had Russian olive is an important diet item. It's low quality as a diet item, but it does have some advantage in that they're able to maintain weight and use it for metabolic energy. And then lastly, we estimated that in that year that we sampled, where we have good temporal diet data, that we were able to estimate in our model that we had about a quarter of the total consumptive demand was made up by Russian olive. So I think from this project, we have a lot more questions and answers about this stuff. And I think in the future, we really are interested in what this interaction means for the native fish. So is this subsidy from a non-native plant supporting a non-native fish, does that increase their impact on the native species? Or is it that they're eating this instead of eating Colorado pike minnow? And I also think there's a lot of indirect, going back to the idea that this big input of litter that's increased and an increase in bank vegetation, like what does that mean for the food web and the food web structure as a whole? So I think there's still a lot to be done here, but thanks for coming and seeing my talk. And I have a ton of people to thank, all my committee members and a lot of different funding agencies and collaborators. So with that, I'll take any questions.